Hello, and welcome to America's Inspiration. I am your host, Kaylee Black, and today's podcast will be over Sojourner Truth. To few, this name may ring a bell, but many don't know who Truth was. Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist, early feminist, and former slave who fought for equality for everyone. Truth is truly an inspiration, and I felt she deserved a podcast episode so we can swim in her greatness. Truth was born as Isabella in 1797. Not much was recorded regarding to slaves, so the exact date is not known. Isabella was sold around age 10 with a flock of sheep for $100. Over the next few years of her life, she was sexually and physically abused by several different owners before she was bought by Mr. Johnny Lee, her last owner. Mr. Lee forced marriage upon her and an older slave named Thomas. Isabella and Thomas had several children who were sold to others. The role black women had in a community of slaves was to be an incubator for more slaves and to keep the house in order. A pamphlet that was written later on stated, "Traditionally, the labor of females, domestic work is supposed to complement and confirm their inferiority." Isabella managed to escape slavery with her youngest daughter. However, she was caught by Mr. Lee. Luckily for her, a Quaker family who didn't live too far agreed to pay for her freedom. During this time, the Second Great Awakening was occurring, where people were becoming more fond of religion. Living with the Quaker family, Isabella had her own awakening. She changed her name to Sojourner Truth and became a preacher. She also joined the abolitionist and feminist movements. The abolitionist movement was in place to get rid of slavery. Some famous people that participated in the abolitionist movement were Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, who Truth once met with. The feminist movement was almost unheard of before. Feminists' agenda was to make women equal to men, similarly to the way abolitionists were aiming for slaves to be equal to free men. Truth was one of the early feminists and was actually most famous for her speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" spoken in 1851. I will be reading and analyzing this speech during the following few minutes. Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth. Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North, all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches, and to have the best place everywhere. No one ever helps me into carriages, or over mud puddles, or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could heed me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as any man, when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, and seen most all sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's it called? Intellect. That's it, honey. What that's got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint, and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean to not let me have my little half measure full? And that little black man in the back there, he says women can't have as much rights as men, because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. And if the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, then these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they is asking to do it. The men better let them. This speech perfectly summed up her agenda about the double negative of being a woman and an African American. She compares herself to a man and to a quote-unquote normal woman. She first spoke about being weak and special Then she explains that she doesn't have any privileges of a woman. Her repetition of "ain't I a woman" adds to that she was pointing out the absurdities of the white man's agenda. Later on in life, Sojourner developed a program to give ex-slaves in the South land, but the South was angry that they didn't have their laborers anymore, so it didn't pass in Congress. However, we will always remember Sojourner Truth as a strong woman who fought for the equality of everyone. Sojourner also didn't get to see that women got to vote almost 60 years after she died in 1863. But we know she was there with us all. I'm Kaylee Black, and I'll see you next time on America's Inspiration.